out loud.
Okay, explanation must be distinguished from justification. Every human action potentially has an explanation. That is, with sufficient knowledge, it would be possible to give an accurate description of the causes of that action. An action is justified only when the person performing the action has sufficient reasons for the action.
So whenever you read right here where it says like that is, and it gives this definition, do you go back and kind of just fill in what an explanation is just directly with the definition? And maybe your brain can do this where mine just can't, or I read that and I'm like, okay, so essentially that sentence is saying every human action potentially has sufficient knowledge, that with sufficient knowledge it would be possible to give an accurate description of what causes that action. Like,
No.
Maybe you don't need to, but whenever sentences get long for me, sometimes I forget what we're actually talking about. And I'm like, all right, so essentially we're just saying like every human action, like it's possible for every human action to have sufficient knowledge for an accurate description of what caused that human action.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, that was kind of wordy, but
No, it's fine because that was a long sentence. I was like,
yeah.
I'm definitely
So
read that.
as soon as I get a definition, I try to apply that definition to what it's talking about.
Okay.
Okay.
An action is justified only when the person performing the action has sufficient reasons for the action. So is that saying like an action is allowed only when the person has like a reason to do it?
Yeah. And I don't know if allowed, but it's like justified, I think of as like, it's stronger than reasonable, but it's like, it's only, okay. Yeah, I guess you said like, okay, it's only okay, or it only is like, yeah. Yep. Perfect.
According to many psychologists, even when there's justification for an action, that justification often performs no part of the explanation. The general principle, however, is that only an action whose justification, that is, the reasons for the action, forms an essential part of its explanation is rational. That's a lot.
Yeah. So we're saying like, hey, according to these many psychologists, and many means many things, we don't really know. It can be really mild actually. So we're saying, hey, according to these, even when there is justification for an action, so it's like even when like, hey, there's reason to do that action, that justification often forms no part of the explanation. So we're saying like, hey, your justification for that actually has nothing to do with what caused the action. Like being allowed to do it isn't what caused it. But then we're saying like, hey, but the general principle is only an action whose justification gives reason for the action forms an essential part of the explanation is rational. I'm like, that is so wordy.
Yeah.
And I think you're in Ellen Cassidy. You read The Loophole, right?
I did not know.
All right, so here, whenever we have double commas, we have 3, but I'm gonna ignore this comma for a second. We can cross off, if we ever really struggle, we can cross off what's in between the commas and read the sentence straight through. So the general principle is that only an action whose justification forms an essential part of its explanation is rational can help make that sentence so much easier for us to read.
Yeah.
And then after you read that sentence, you can go back and kind of fill in, like, if you need that inside information. So we're saying the reasons for the action, that's just the definition for justification.
Okay.
Sorry, that was a lot.
That's okay.
All right, go ahead. That's a huge tip, especially on reading comp. I do that all the time when I'm reading, as I don't even fight it. I just I might read it once through, but then I erase what's in between the commas, read it, and then add in what's in between the commas.
Okay. Do you think highlighting is a waste of time during the test, or?
Yeah, I personally do. Yes.
I was just wondering your opinion because I hear people say it like takes too much time. Okay, cool. Like,
I think that if you don't over highlight, if I did reading comp now, awesome. Okay, so then go ahead and go through these answer choices.
Oh, yay. Okay. When a human action is justified, that action has no explanation. No.
Yeah, no explanation. We have no idea. Awesome.
If there are any reasons among the causes of an action, then that action is rational. I feel like that might be a no too, because of something that was said. Wait, if there are any reasons among the causes of an action, that action is rational. I would think no, that's no, because any reason.
Any reasons, that's way too strong. We're saying like, hey,
Yeah.
if there are any reasons for what causes you to do that, the action is rational. Like, no, our whole thing is saying like, no.
Yeah.
And our general principle is that only an action whose justification forms an essential part of its explanation is rational. We don't know about anything else. Awesome.
Some psychologists believe that the justification for an action never forms an essential part of its explanation.
So what's the strong word in there that we need to double check to make sure that it's okay?
It's either some or never.
Never. Never is really strong. Some
Yeah.
actually very mild.
Okay.
But
because I knew I saw in there like many psychologists. I was like some and many, like
yes,
that's
okay. So many, I think some people actually say many is at least one too. I tend to think of many a little bit stronger than that. To be honest, like I think of like at least 2 or 3, but I still think it's very mild. But many would definitely be strong enough to support some.
Okay.
The some is as mild as, other than none, some is as mild as they get.
Okay.
But never is extremely strong.
Yeah. Because it doesn't say right there, even when there is justification for an action, that justification forms no part of the explanation. Justification for an action never forms an essential part of an explanation. So I think never and no. Is that?
But this says often forms. So
Okay.
is that never?
No.
So do you see how that word makes it wrong? Yep.
Okay. That's tricky.
You'll get better at it now that you know to like pay attention to this level of detail.
Yeah. Okay. There are actions whose causes cannot be discovered. I feel like that's not even, you can't even, it's not even talking about that.
No, and like they're you just see how they're switching it where we're saying like, hey, we need to know what causes it. So they're making us assume like since we need to know what causes it, there must be things that we don't know. But because it must be true, we don't know. Like maybe every action cause can be discovered.
Okay. If any human actions are rational, then reasons must sometimes be causes of action. Yes.
Why?
Knowledge possible given. Because of the last sentence, only an action whose justification. Oh shoot, no.
Oh, sorry. Yes, you're right. You're right. I crossed it off for you to make it easier to read. But what is justification?
Did you know? Only an action whose justification. Explanation. Every human action explanation that is. Sorry, what is justification?
What is what is the definition of justification here? Because it goes, that is, so that is, this right here in between those commas that I crossed off is our definition of justification.
Okay. Only when the person performing the action has sufficient reasons for the action, that's justification.
Yeah, the reasons for the justification. So justification just means reasons for the action. So,
okay.
Only an action who has reasons for the action forms the essential part of the explanation is rational.
Is rational. Okay, so it's just basically the last part of the sentence. That's
So we're saying, hey, if any human actions are rational, so if one of them is rational, then
Yeah.
there must sometimes be causes for their action. Yeah.
Okay.
Because we know that every human action an action is justified only when, yes, that's why. Perfect. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
Yep.